When they came to the land cruisers, Tim said, "I want to ride in the front one this time with Dr. Grant." Malcolm said, "Unfortunately, Dr. Grant and I need to talk." "I'll just sit and listen. I won't say anything," Tim said. "It's a private conversation," Malcolm said. "Tell you what, Tim," Ed Regis said. "Let them sit in the rear car by themselves. We'll sit in the front car and you can use the night vision goggles." "Have you ever used night vision goggles, Tim?" "They're goggles with very sensitive CCDs that allow you to see in the dark." "Neat," he said, and moved toward the first car. "Hey," Lex said, "I want to use it too." "No," Tim said. "No fair. No fair! You get to do everything, Timmy." Ed Regis watched them go and said to Grant, "I can see what the ride back is going to be like." Grant and Malcolm climbed into the second car. A few raindrops spattered the windshield. "Let's get going," Ed Regis said. "I'm about ready for dinner. And I could do with a nice banana daiquiri. What do you say, folks? Daiquiri sound good?" He pounded the metal panel of the car. "See you back at camp," he said, and he started running toward the first car and climbed aboard. A red light on the dashboard blinked. With a soft electric whir, the land cruisers started off. Driving back in the fading light, Malcolm seemed oddly subdued. Grant said, "You must feel vindicated about your theory." "As a matter of fact, I'm feeling a bit of dread. I suspect we are at a very dangerous point." "Why?" "Intuition." "Do mathematicians believe in intuition?" "Absolutely. Very important intuition." "Actually, I was thinking of fractals," Malcolm said. "You know about fractals?" Grant shook his head. "Not really, no. Fractals are a kind of geometry associated with a man named Mandelbrot. Unlike ordinary Euclidean geometry that everybody learns in school, squares and cubes and spheres, fractal geometry appears to describe real objects in the natural world. Mountains and clouds are fractal shapes. So fractals are probably related to reality, somehow. Well, Mandelbrot found a remarkable thing with his geometric tools. He found that things looked almost identical at different scales." "At different scales," Grant said. "For example," Malcolm said, "a big mountain seen from far away has a certain rugged mountain shape. If you get closer and examine a small peak of the big mountain, it will have the same mountain shape. In fact, you can go all the way down the scale to a tiny speck of rock seen under a microscope. It will have the same basic fractal shape as the big mountain." "I don't really see why this is worrying you," Grant said. He yawned. He smelled the sulfur fumes of the volcanic steam. They were coming now to the section of road that ran near the coastline, overlooking the beach and the ocean. "It's a way of looking at things," Malcolm said. "Mandelbrot found a sameness from the smallest to the largest. And this sameness of scale also occurs for events." "Events?" "Consider cotton prices," Malcolm said. "There are good records of cotton prices going back more than 100 years. When you study fluctuations in cotton prices, you find that the graph of price fluctuations in the course of a day looks basically like the graph for a week, which looks basically like the graph for a year or for 10 years. And that's how things are. A day is like a whole life. You start out doing one thing, but end up doing something else. Plan to run an errand, but never get there. And at the end of your life, your whole existence has that same haphazard quality too. Your whole life has the same shape as a single day." "I guess it's one way to look at things," Grant said. "No," Malcolm said. "It's the only way to look at things. At least the only way that is true to reality. You see, the fractal idea of sameness carries within it an aspect of recursion, a kind of doubling back on itself, which means that events are unpredictable, that they can change suddenly and without warning." "Okay. But we have soothed ourselves into imagining sudden change as something that happens outside the normal order of things. An accident like a car crash, or beyond our control like a fatal illness. We do not conceive of sudden, radical, irrational change as built into the very fabric of existence. Yet it is. And chaos theory teaches us, Malcolm said, that straight linearity, which we have come to take for granted in everything from physics to fiction, simply does not exist. Linearity is an artificial way of viewing the world. Real life isn't a series of interconnected events occurring one after another like beads strung on a necklace. Life is actually a series of encounters in which one event may change those that follow in a wholly unpredictable, even devastating way. Malcolm sat back in his seat, looking toward the other land cruiser a few yards ahead. That's a deep truth about the structure of our universe. But for some reason, we insist on behaving as if it were not true. At that moment, the cars jolted to a stop. "What's that?" Grant said. Up ahead, they saw the kids in the car, pointing toward the ocean. Offshore, beneath lowering clouds, Grant saw the dark outline of the supply boat making its way back toward Punta Arenas. "Why have we stopped?" Malcolm said. Grant turned on the radio and heard the girl saying excitedly, "Look there, Timmy! You can see it! It's there!" Malcolm squinted at the boat. They talking about the boat? Apparently. Ed Regis climbed out of the front car and came running back to their window. "I'm sorry," he said, "but the kids are all worked up. Do you have binoculars here?" "For what?" "The little girl says she sees something on the boat. Some kind of animal," Regis said. Grant grabbed the binoculars and rested his elbows on the window ledge of the land cruiser. He scanned the long shape of the supply ship. It was so dark it was almost a silhouette. As he watched, the ship's running lights came on, brilliant in the dark purple twilight. "Do you see anything?" Regis asked. "No," Grant said. "They're low down," Lex said over the radio. "Look low down." Grant tilted the binoculars down, scanning the hull just above the waterline. The supply ship was broad-beamed, with a splash flange that ran the length of the ship. But it was quite dark now, and he could hardly make out details. "No, nothing." "I can see them," Lex said impatiently. "Near the back. Look near the back." "How can she see anything in this light?" Malcolm said. "Kids can see," Grant said. "They've got visual acuity we forgot we ever had." He swung the binoculars toward the stern, moving them slowly, and suddenly he saw the animals. They were playing, darting among the silhouetted stern structures. He could see them only briefly, but even in the fading light he could tell that they were upright animals, about 2 feet tall, standing with stiff, balancing tails. "You see them now?" Lex said. "I see them," he said. "What are they?" "They're raptors," Grant said. "At least 2, maybe more. Juveniles." "Jesus," Ed Regis said. "That boat's going to the mainland." Malcolm shrugged. "Don't get excited. Just call the control room and tell them to recall the boat." Ed Regis reached in and grabbed the radio from the dashboard. They heard hissing static and clicks as he rapidly changed channels. "There's something wrong with this one," he said. "It's not working." He ran off to the first land cruiser. They saw him duck into it. Then he looked back at them. "There's something wrong with both the radios," he said. "I can't raise the control room." "Then let's get going," Grant said. In the control room, Muldoon stood before the big windows that overlooked the park. At 7 o'clock, the quartz floodlights came on all over the island, turning the landscape into a glowing jewel stretching away to the south. This was his favorite moment of the day. He heard the crackle of static from the radios. "The land cruisers have started again," Arnold said. "They're on their way home." "But why did they stop?" Hammond said. "And why can't we talk to them?" "I don't know," Arnold said. "Maybe they turned off the radios in the cars." "Probably the storm," Muldoon said. "Interference from the storm." "They'll be here in 20 minutes, Hammond said. "You better call down and make sure the dining room is ready for them. Those kids are going to be hungry." Arnold picked up the phone and heard a steady, monotonous hiss. What's this? What's going on? Jesus, hang that up, Nedry said. You'll screw up the data stream. You've taken all the phone lines? Even the internal ones? I've taken all the lines that communicate outside, Nedry said. But your internal lines should still work. Arnold punched console buttons one after another. He heard nothing but hissing on all the lines. Looks like you've got them all. Sorry about that, Nedry said. I'll clear a couple for you at the end of the next transmission, in about 15 minutes. He yawned. Looks like a long weekend for me. I guess I'll go get that Coke now. He picked up his shoulder bag and headed for the door. Don't touch my console, okay? The door closed. What a slob, Hammond said. Yeah, Arnold said. But I guess he knows what he's doing. Along the side of the road, clouds of volcanic steam misted rainbows in the bright quartz lights. Grant said into the radio, "How long does it take the ship to reach the mainland?" 18 hours, Ed Regis said. More or less. It's pretty reliable. He glanced at his watch. It should arrive around 11 tomorrow morning. Grant frowned. You still can't talk to the control room? Not so far. How about Harding? Can you reach him? No, I've tried. He may have his radio turned off. Malcolm was shaking his head. So we're the only ones who know about the animals on the ship. I'm trying to raise somebody, Ed Regis said. I mean, Christ, we don't want those animals on the mainland. How long until we get back to the base? From here, another 16, 17 minutes, Ed Regis said. At night, the whole road was illuminated by big floodlights. It felt to Grant as if they were driving through a bright green tunnel of leaves. Large raindrops spattered the windshield. Grant felt the Land Cruiser slow, then stop. Now what? Lex said, I don't want to stop. Why did we stop? And then suddenly, all the floodlights went out. The road was plunged into darkness. Lex said, Hey! Probably just a power outage or something, Ed Regis said. I'm sure the lights will be on in a minute. What the hell? Arnold said, staring at his monitors. What happened? Muldoon said. You lose power? Yeah, but only power on the perimeter. Everything in this building's working fine. But outside in the park, the power is gone. Lights, TV, cameras, everything. His remote video monitors had gone black. What about the two Land Cruisers? Stopped somewhere around the Tyrannosaur paddock. Well, Muldoon said, call maintenance, and let's get the power back on. Arnold picked up one of his phones and heard hissing. Nedry's computers talking to each other. No phones. That damn Nedry. Nedry, where the hell is he? Dennis Nedry pushed open the door marked fertilization. With the perimeter power out, all the security card locks were disarmed. Every door in the building opened with a touch. The problems with the security system were high on Jurassic Park's bug list. Nedry wondered if anybody ever imagined that it wasn't a bug, that Nedry had programmed it that way. He had built in a classic trapdoor. Few programmers of large computer systems could resist the temptation to leave themselves a secret entrance. Partly it was common sense. If inept users locked up the system and men called you for help, you always had a way to get in and repair the mess. And partly, it was a kind of signature. Kilroy was here. And partly, it was insurance for the future. Nedry was annoyed with the Jurassic Park project. Late in the schedule, InGen had demanded extensive modifications to the system, but hadn't been willing to pay for them, arguing they should be included under the original contract. Lawsuits were threatened. Letters were written to Nedry's other clients, implying that Nedry was unreliable. It was blackmail. And in the end, Nedry had been forced to eat his overages on Jurassic Park and to make the changes that Hammond wanted. But later, when he was approached by Lewis Dodgson at Biosyn, Nedry was ready to listen, and able to say that he could indeed get past Jurassic Park security. He could get into any room, any system, anywhere in the park, because he had programmed it that way, just in case. He entered the fertilization room. The lab was deserted. As he had anticipated, all the staff was at dinner. Nedry unzipped his shoulder bag and removed the can of Gillette shaving cream. He unscrewed the base and saw the interior was divided into a series of cylindrical slots. He pulled on a pair of heavy insulated gloves and opened the walk-in freezer marked Contents Viable Biological. Maintain minus 10 degrees Celsius minimum. The freezer was the size of a small closet, with shelves from floor to ceiling. Most of the shelves contained reagents and liquids in plastic sacks. To one side, he saw a smaller nitrogen cold box with a heavy ceramic door. He opened it, and a rack of small tubes slid out in a cloud of white liquid nitrogen smoke. The embryos were arranged by species: Stegosaurus, Apatosaurus, Hadrosaurus, Tyrannosaurus. Each embryo in a thin glass container, wrapped in silver foil, stoppered with polythene. Nedry quickly took 2 of each, slipping them into the shaving cream can. Then he screwed the base of the can shut and twisted the top. There was a hiss of releasing gas inside, and the can frosted in his hands. Dodgson had said there was enough coolant to last 36 hours. More than enough time to get back to San Jose. Nedry left the freezer, returned to the main lab. He dropped the can back in his bag, zipped it shut. He went back into the hallway. The theft had taken less than 2 minutes. He could imagine the consternation upstairs in the control room as they began to realize what had happened. All their security codes were scrambled, and all their phone lines were jammed. Without his help, it would take hours to untangle the mess. But in just a few minutes, Nedry would be back in the control room, setting things right. And no one would ever suspect what he had done. Grinning, Dennis Nedry walked down to the ground floor, nodded to the guard, and continued downstairs to the basement. Passing the neat lines of electric land cruisers, he went to the gasoline-powered Jeep parked against the wall. He climbed into it, noticing some odd gray tubing on the passenger seat. It looked almost like a rocket launcher, he thought, as he turned the ignition key and started the Jeep. Nedry glanced at his watch. From here, into the park, and 3 minutes straight to the east dock. 3 minutes from there, back to the control room. Piece of cake. "Damn it," Arnold said, punching buttons on the console. "It's all screwed up." Muldoon was standing at the windows, looking out at the park. The lights had gone out all over the island, except in the immediate area around the main buildings. He saw a few staff personnel hurrying to get out of the rain, but no one seemed to realize anything was wrong. Muldoon looked over at the visitor lodge, where the lights burned brightly. "Uh-oh," Arnold said. "We have real trouble." "What's that?" Muldoon said. He turned away from the window, and so he didn't see the Jeep drive out of the underground garage and head east along the maintenance road into the park. "That idiot Nedry turned off the security systems," Arnold said. "The whole building's opened up. None of the doors are locked anymore." "I'll notify the guards," Muldoon said. "That's the least of it," Arnold said. "When you turn off the security, you turn off all the peripheral fences as well." "The fences," Muldoon said. "The electrical fences," Arnold said. "They're off. All over the island." "You mean..." "That's right," Arnold said. "The animals can get out now." Arnold lit a cigarette. "Probably nothing will happen, but you never know." Muldoon started toward the door. "I better drive out and bring in the people in those 2 land cruisers," he said, "just in case." Muldoon quickly went downstairs to the garage. He wasn't really worried about the fences going down. Most of the dinosaurs had been in their paddocks for 9 months or more, and they had brushed up against the fences more than once, with notable results. Muldoon knew how quickly animals learned to avoid shock stimuli. You could train a laboratory pigeon with just 2 or 3 stimulation events, so it was unlikely the dinosaurs would now approach the fences. Muldoon was more concerned about what the people in the cars would do. He didn't want them getting out of the land cruisers, because once the power came back on, the cars would start moving again, whether the people were inside them or not. They might be left behind. Of course, in the rain, it was unlikely they would leave the cars. But still, you never knew. He reached the garage and hurried toward the Jeep. It was lucky, he thought, that he had had the foresight to put the launcher in it. He could start right out and be out there, and it was gone. What the hell? Muldoon stared at the empty parking space, astonished. The Jeep was gone. What the hell was happening? Fourth iteration. Inevitably, underlying instabilities begin to appear. Ian Malcolm. The main road. Rain drummed loudly on the roof of the Land Cruiser. Tim felt the night vision goggles pressing heavily on his forehead. He reached for the knob near his ear and adjusted the intensity. There was a brief phosphorescent flare, and then, in shades of electronic green and black, he could see the Land Cruiser behind, with Dr. Grant and Dr. Malcolm inside. Neat. Dr. Grant was staring out the front windshield toward him. Tim saw him pick up the radio from the dash. There was a burst of static, and then he heard Dr. Grant's voice. "Can you see us back here?" Tim picked up the radio from Ed Regis. "I see you. Everything all right?" "We're fine, Dr. Grant." "Stay in the car." "We will. Don't worry." He clicked the radio off. Ed Regis snorted. "It's pouring down rain. Of course we'll stay in the car," he muttered. Tim turned to look at the foliage at the side of the road. Through the goggles, the foliage was a bright electronic green, and beyond he could see sections of the green grid pattern of the fence. The Land Cruisers were stopped on the downslope of a hill, which must mean they were someplace near the Tyrannosaur area. It would be amazing to see a Tyrannosaur with these night vision goggles. A real thrill. Maybe the Tyrannosaur would come to the fence and look over at them. Tim wondered if its eyes would glow in the dark when he saw them. That would be neat. But he didn't see anything, and eventually he stopped looking. Everyone in the cars fell silent. The rain thrummed on the roof of the car. Sheets of water streamed down over the sides of the windows. It was hard for Tim to see out, even with the goggles. "How long have we been sitting here?" Malcolm asked. "I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes. I wonder what the problem is. Maybe a short circuit from the rain." But it happened before the rain really started. There was another silence. In a tense voice, Lex said, "But there's no lightning, right?" She had always been afraid of lightning, and she now sat nervously squeezing her leather mitt in her hands. Dr. Grant said, "What was that? We didn't quite read that." "Just my sister talking." "Oh." Tim again scanned the foliage, but saw nothing. Certainly nothing as big as a Tyrannosaur. He began to wonder if the Tyrannosaurs came out at night. Were they nocturnal animals? Tim wasn't sure if he had ever read that. He had the feeling that Tyrannosaurs were all-weather, day or night animals. The time of day didn't matter to a Tyrannosaur. The rain continued to pour. "Hell of a rain," Ed Regis said. "It's really coming down." Lex said, "I'm hungry." "I know that, Lex," Regis said, "but we're stuck here, sweetie. The cars run on electricity in buried cables in the road." "Stuck for how long?" "Until they fix the electricity." Listening to the sound of the rain, Tim felt himself growing sleepy. He yawned and turned to look at the palm trees on the left side of the road. and was startled by a sudden thump as the ground shook. He swung back just in time to catch a glimpse of a dark shape as it swiftly crossed the road between the two cars. Jesus! What was it? It was huge. It was big as the car. Tim, are you there? He picked up the radio. Yes, I'm here. Did you see it, Tim? No, Tim said. I missed it. What the hell was it? Malcolm said. Are you wearing the night vision goggles, Tim? Yes, I'll watch, Tim said. Was it the Tyrannosaur? Ed Regis asked. I don't think so. It was in the road. But you didn't see it, Ed Regis said. No. Tim felt bad that he had missed seeing the animal, whatever it was. There was a sudden white crack of lightning, and his night goggles flared bright green. He blinked his eyes and started counting. 1,000, 2 1,000. The thunder crashed, deafeningly loud and very close. Lex began to cry. Oh no! Take it easy, honey, Ed Regis said. It's just lightning. Tim scanned the side of the road. The rain was coming down hard now, shaking the leaves with hammering drops. It made everything move. Everything seemed alive. He scanned the leaves. He stopped. There was something beyond the leaves. Tim looked up, higher. Behind the foliage, beyond the fence, he saw a thick body with a pebbled, grainy surface like the bark of a tree. But it wasn't a tree. He continued to look higher, sweeping the goggles upward. He saw the huge head of the Tyrannosaurus, just standing there, looking over the fence at the two land cruisers. The lightning flashed again, and the big animal rolled its head and bellowed in the glaring light. Then darkness and silence again, and the pounding rain. Tim. Yes, Dr. Grant. You see what it is? Yes, Dr. Grant. Tim had the sense that Dr. Grant was trying to talk in a way that wouldn't upset his sister. What's going on right now? Nothing, Tim said, watching the Tyrannosaur through his night goggles. Just standing on the other side of the fence. I can't see much from here, Tim. I can see fine, Dr. Grant. It's just standing there. Okay. Lex continued to cry, snuffling. There was another pause. Tim watched the Tyrannosaur. The head was huge. The animal looked from one vehicle to another, then back again. It seemed to stare right at Tim. In the goggles, the eyes glowed bright green. Tim felt a chill, but then, as he looked down the animal's body, moving down from the massive head and jaws, he saw the smaller, muscular forelimb. It waved in the air, and then it gripped the fence. Jesus Christ, Ed Regis said, staring out the window. The greatest predator the world has ever known. The most fearsome attack in human history. Somewhere in the back of his publicist's brain, Ed Regis was still writing copy. But he could feel his knees begin to shake uncontrollably, his trousers flapping like flags. Jesus, he was frightened. He didn't want to be here. Alone among all the people in the two cars, Ed Regis knew what a dinosaur attack was like. He knew what happened to people. He had seen the mangled bodies that resulted from a raptor attack. He could picture it in his mind. And this was a Rex. Much, much bigger. The greatest meat-eater that ever walked the earth. Jesus. When the Tyrannosaur roared, it was terrifying. A scream from some other world. Ed Regis felt the spreading warmth in his trousers. He'd peed in his pants. He was simultaneously embarrassed and terrified. But he knew he had to do something. He couldn't just stay here. He had to do something. Something. His hands were shaking, trembling against the dash. Jesus Christ, he said again. Bad language, Lex said, wagging her finger at him. Tim heard the sound of a door opening, and he swung his head away from the Tyrannosaur. The night vision goggles streaked laterally, in time to see Ed Regis stepping out through the open door, ducking his head in the rain. "Hey," Lex said, "where are you going?" Ed Regis just turned and ran in the opposite direction from the Tyrannosaur, disappearing into the woods. The door to the Land Cruiser hung open. The paneling was getting wet. "He left," Lex said. "Where did he go? He left us alone." "Shut the door," Tim said, but she had started to scream, "He left us! He left us!" "Tim, what's going on?" It was Dr. Grant on the radio. "Tim!" Tim leaned forward and tried to shut the door. From the back seat, he couldn't reach the handle. He looked back at the Tyrannosaur as lightning flashed again, momentarily silhouetting the huge black shape against the white flaring sky.